Since I've known myself, I was a very conscious child. I realized pretty early on that I was living in a very shallow and self serving world. I had very little friends, and even with them, I could never feel loved or cared for. Looking back, I was very lonely, surrounded by parents who did care for me, just had their own issues to deal with first. My grandparents, who sometimes caused many turbulences in my family, and by classmates, who would consider me an arrogant straight A just because I was too closed off in order not to get hurt. Seems like for a long time my life has been about survival, always hoping to finish this class or that one, and yes, finally getting out of this hellhole that is my hometown. Throughout the years, I've gotten stronger and stronger. In some ways, I was shaped by those who hurt me, and in others, I kept my individuality. But still, I saw the world in black and white. Used to be very rigid and lost, untrusting of the world, because very few people have shown me compassion. And yes, for a long time, I wasn't one of them. I used to hate the little me who had been fighting every day just to survive the wrath of her mates. And for a long time, their hatred had permeated my soul, refusing to see reality for what it is. I remember whenever certain people would leave me, I used to say that my people are out there and someday I'll meet them. And I should never give up hope that I'd be left alone. The funny thing is that, yes, I was right. But what's even funnier is that now I see the world so much more clearly. I understand the path I had to take to get here. I'm at right now. I am being liberated every day from my traumas, faulty beliefs, painful relationships, internalized hatred, fear of intimacy, and all those chains that have kept my heart in lock are now dissolving, and I'm becoming the person I meant to be. Vibrant, loving, funny, unique, giving, and trusting. My heart is smiling, and so am I. So here's to my teenagehood, my enemy, my friend, and my teacher. Lesson number 1. Others' opinions are only reflections of themselves and their psyche. No matter who you're talking to, whatever they say is always reflective of their conditioning, of how they were brought up, and the way they see the world. It usually never truly involves us as outsiders, it always involves them. So whenever I try to look and question why someone would even share their opinions of how I should live my life, I always look at how are they living theirs. Are they happy? Are they okay with the way they are living their lives? Or do they think that that's the only way to live? I usually never think of it as a sort of insult anymore, because I understand that the way I live my life is completely up to me. And yes, sometimes those opinions might be right, and sometimes they might change the way I truly see myself. They can unlock something in me. In order not to hate that person or despise that person, understanding why this opinion is there in the first place, why did they think it was necessary to share it with me, is also a good way to kind of let go of hatred and anger towards that person. Lesson number 2. Trust in who you are and don't be afraid to share you with others. I used to be very scared to show my true identity, always showing the perfect versions of ourselves, which is in a way logical and normal. But the more I started to get closer to people, I realized that there's a certain point where you need to take that mask off, where you cannot pretend anymore to be someone else. So why should you pretend in the first place? I realized that it takes a certain bravery to show all parts of yourselves unfiltered to the world. But in some way, if one person is able to do that, it means that everyone is. It means that it incentivizes others to be themselves around you as well. And sharing our weirdness with each other is an even more fascinating phenomenon. The more comfortable I am with this person and sharing them with the world, the easier it has become for me to be myself and not to be anxious around these certain individuals. Lesson number 3. Perfection is an illusion. Well, more like a delusion. Perfection and I have a very toxic relationship, or I should say, I used to have a very toxic relationship. Being a Virgo in it all isn't really helpful because we tend to be perfectionists. But the more I liberate myself from these false beliefs, I start to see that perfection does not exist. First of all, because it's subjective. So it means that what's perfect for me could never be perfect for someone else. And secondly, perfection cannot be measured because us as humans live in a world where nothing's good enough. So with this mindset, you realize that your idea of perfect will never be good enough. So once you get to a point where you're quote unquote perfect, or you've done something perfectly, you realize that, well, you could have done it just 1% better. So instead of striving for perfectionism in any area of my life, I strive to see what can I truly make out of that situation. Does it involve perfectionism at all? Or is there something else that I'm trying to reach, that I'm trying to find within that circumstance? So for example, I used to be very perfectionist when it came to my studies. But then I realized the reason for that was because I set up this mindset as a defense mechanism. Survival in that circumstance, within the bullying and everything, was studying. Lesson number 4. Your past can be your teacher, but not your companion. Since I've been going to therapy religiously, I realized that I have so much to learn from my past. Not necessarily my past mistakes, but just behavioral patterns that I've taken up unconsciously, either from family or just as a defense mechanism to overcome certain painful memories. But the more I dwelled into my past, the more I was able to learn, understand, forgive, and let go. And letting go is really important because you cannot live in the present if you keep on going back to your past. It's one thing to use it to learn and to discover who you were before and who you are still now, but it's another thing to keep living in it each day, every day. So for me, distancing myself from my past, looking at it objectively, was a gateway to finally getting free from all the past trauma that I've been through and see it as a story. It was also important because I could start to see the lies I've either told myself or other people have been telling me about who I should be or who I am. And now I get to choose who I want to be. Lesson 5, forgive your child self. So I've touched on this a little bit in the intro. I used to really despise who I was when I was a child, around the ages of 13 to 16. When I got into high school, I started to really change myself to kind of fit in, but that's another story to tell. But anyways, in that period, in middle school, I could never remember myself dearly. And so for a long time, whenever anyone would show pictures of myself from that time or videos about me, I used to always look away, and I could never face myself and see who I was and accept myself unconditionally. Back then, a lot of my classmates just hated me for being me and doing me. And I was doing that to myself. I hated myself. And then I realized that I was no better than them. How could I hate myself for being the way I was? I didn't know better. I had no one to help me. And those who wanted to help didn't really help. They just stirred me into insanity even more, which wasn't their fault, but still. So, with this in mind, I was truly open to finally do things for my child self and at least be that one person who forgives myself for who I used to be. And in that moment, I felt liberated. Lesson number 6. Don't be afraid to ask for help. In many areas of my life, I used to be too shy or afraid to ask anyone for either guidance, help, or just ask questions. I used to be too afraid to involve someone else in my life to that extent. But then slowly I realized that I don't have to do this alone, and I don't have to live this life always thinking that I should always depend on myself. Sometimes it's okay to say that you need help, even when it's something serious. That's when I decided to go to therapy and finally try and put my life back into its original place. And it gave me so much possibility to see the world in a better way, to understand who I am and understand the people around me and understand my relationship with my environment and with my inner environment as well. It truly shows how when you feel like you're lost, you can admit defeat and you can tell people that you're not okay and that you need help, no matter what that thing is about. The more you deny that in yourself, the more shame you'll feel about it. And shame is just an endless cycle of self-destruction. So instead, own that sometimes you need to get help. Lesson number 7. You're not your thoughts or emotions. I used to believe that everything I think is true, that the thoughts are representative of my reality. And I just realized how contradicting they are. I found that I am not my thoughts. Thoughts are created in the mind, and usually there's a reason why they appear. And even intrusive thoughts have their own internalized reasons for appearing. I realize that I'm more the observer than the thinker. I realize that as much as I pay attention to my thoughts means that the more I'm not them. If I could control my thoughts, I would be my thoughts, but I can't. And so goes for emotions. Usually emotions arise from past memories or because of a similar situation that happened in the past. This way of understanding of my thoughts and emotions had showed me that it's truly up to me whether I want to listen to them and give in to them or think of them from a distance, unattach myself. So once I noticed this shift happening, I started to hate my body less. I started to bring myself down less. I started to criticize myself less because I had the key to my thoughts. Lesson number 8. Sometimes you have to lose a battle to win a war. Attachment in and of itself is giving your power over to someone else. It creates dependence. For so long, I thought that every single battle in my life has to be won, and there has to be a good ending to each of them. In retrospect, I realized that sometimes you have to lose so that in the end, when it comes down to winning the war, you'll have the tools to win it. I don't want to say a specific example, but I want to say the path that it took me to win the war whilst losing the battle. Thinking that I could have something that I desired so dearly and so obsessively that have ultimately left me in total emptiness had opened a door for me that now unlocked so many things in my life, unlocked new ways of thinking and new ways of liberation, and that being spiritualism. In this way, if I look at my life, all those regrets, all those mistakes were only lost battles that have ultimately led to me winning the war, either with myself or either with my destination. If it weren't for those lost battles, I could have never found myself in the place I'm at right now, which is total peace and tranquility. Lesson number 9, shatter your comfort zone. It doesn't fucking exist. Comfort zones, again, have become, in a way, a creation of our perceived reality. It's a way for us to detect what we're able to do or what we're not able to do. If there were no idea of this comfort zone, or if we wouldn't try to put ourselves in a box every time, then all those opportunities that we were afraid to take, we would have taken them. The more I stepped out of my comfort zone, the more I realized that it was just a decision that depended on either a no or a yes. And whenever I chose to listen to my heart, despite being anxious and being afraid, I've always found out that I did the right thing. So shattering your comfort zone is also connected to allowing your heart to take the lead, taking that leap of faith and trusting in your own self enough to the extent where you know that no matter where the situation takes you, you'll be okay. Lesson number 10. In the end, it will all make sense. Looking back at the past 10 years of my life, I see how much I had to go through in order to be able to experience this present moment. The opportunities that I was given, I am truly grateful for. And I'm grateful for all the pain that was caused to me. I'm grateful for every single person that had given me example of who I should or shouldn't be. I'm grateful for every path that I took because it always led me to somewhere within me. The metaphor of the maze is ever so present in my life, and finding out that with each step I took, the closer I got to knowing myself, to finding out who I truly am. These past experiences have shaped me, and I'm glad to be me. I'm glad that I'm here. I finally feel like I've arrived to a point where now I feel comfortable in. And of course, with life, there are many challenges ahead of me. But for one moment, finally I'm able to say that I feel free.